So the hot dog story would have been, I would have heard this 30, 40 years ago. And it's something I try to remember. A slightly humorous story, but it's got a very good message to it. And it relates back to after the war. And of course there are a number of settlers that came to America of all different ethnic backgrounds and came and settled in America. And one of these couples that came to America and virtually had nothing settled, and they settled near a major road. And there was this old store that had been closed down, and all they could afford was to rent the couple of rooms that were above it. And so they rented these rooms, and they were thinking, what are we going to do for a living? And the wife went out and did some housework, and the husband did a bit of labouring, and then they thought about it for a little while, and the husband was renowned for making beautiful hot dogs, lovely hot dogs, you know, with the mustard, and they're those hot dogs that have got the hole in the middle, and you heat the roll up and you put the hot dog down the middle of it with the sauce, fresh bread, and they're absolutely magnificent hot dogs. So they started doing those, and they thought, well, we'll put a little stand out the front and sell these hot dogs to the cars going past. And they put a little stand out the front, and then they started making cordial to go with the hot dogs, and then they started selling soft drinks, and the business got bigger and bigger and bigger, and ultimately they went to the landlord and said, can we rent the downstairs? And they actually opened a hot dog shop here on the high side of the road. And about that time the wife got pregnant, and they started having, I think they had 2 children from memory, but they had a couple of kids, and one of them, a boy and a girl, that's what it was. And they got busier and busier and busier, and ultimately the highway became a freeway, and cars would stream in there all day long to get these hot dogs. Very big business, and they employed staff, and off they went, and their son grew up, and they had enough money. And one particular night, the husband and wife went to bed, and they'd turned the lights off, because by this time the hot dog stand had flashing lights outside, all different colours, and very busy business. And they went to bed, and they were lying there, and the husband said, darling, I want to send our son to Harvard, to business, because he can have all the opportunities in this land that I never had, and I want him to learn how to run a business. And so they agreed with that. And off the son went to Harvard. And here it was, the business was flourishing, selling heaps and heaps of hot dogs. And they had more money than they knew what to do with, really. And the cars had just come in, and then they had a drive-through. And just hot dogs, hot dogs, hot dogs. And you could have them anyway. And you could have different flavoured hot dogs. It all grew from just that original stand. Son was off at Harvard, and he came home after the 2nd semester and said, oh, how's business going, Dad? I've been to Harvard, and we're studying economics, and we're studying everything that's happening. And the father said, oh, no, business is going good. And the son said, well, one of the things we've learned is that you need to worry about your overheads and cut your costs and wastage down in this type of business. And that's one of the things we learned, because there's going to be a bit of a recession, and things are going to get tight, and the businesses that will survive will be the ones that have got the low overheads. And again, he went up to bed with his wife, who was already in bed reading a book, and he said, darling, I'm so glad that we sent our son to Harvard, because he's got all these ideas and he knows what's going to happen. We're going to have to watch our costs a little bit. So what they did is they started ordering less buns, so that late in the night they would run out of buns, so they had no wastage. And they started turning the lights off before they closed to save on electricity. And they turned off the hot dog stand light that they used to leave on all night, with hot dogs open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. They turned that light off, and they were saving all these costs. And then they worked out that if they let one staff member go and had the clients wait a little bit longer, they would save money. And so all these things started to happen, and then the business started going down a little bit. So come the end of the first year of the son being at Harvard, he came home and he said, oh, how's business going, Dad? And Dad said, oh, well, you were right, son, it was a little bit tighter, but we're still doing fine. And he said, yes, well, you've just got to be so careful of your overheads, you've got to be so careful of your costs. away he went again. Now, you know what happens in this story, don't you? 6 months, 12 months later, the business hasn't got any business coming in, the cars have stopped going, they've got rid of the staff, they're not using electricity, the bun sales are down, everything's down. Again, the husband walks up the stairs and says, I'm so glad we sent our son to Harvard, because he knew what I never knew, that the business wasn't going to work because we were spending too much in overheads, and they closed the business with nothing. So when you're in trouble, always remember that you need a balance. You need to be conscious of your overheads, your expenses. You need to be conscious of making enough money, having enough turnover, and you need to be conscious of the efficiency. So instead of spending all your time in how can I save those costs, how can I do that, the major area is really to spend in how can I be more efficient. And that's not necessarily cutting staff, because if you increase your overheads and you're efficient, the costs will look after themselves. Don't concentrate on the costs, which is what we tend to do when we're in financial crisis. Concentrate on being efficient and increasing your turnover.